So I want people to understand that being a servant leader really impacts outside of the workplace, outside of the space, outside of that conversation that you had. That is a trickle down effect, and it creates a domino effect. So if you are a servant leader, you're pouring into that person, they're going to pour into another person, they're going to have better relationships, and it just makes the world a better place.
Just want to thank you for being here first before anything else. I really appreciate you spending the time. From like the research that I've done ahead of the show, just kind of looking into your background a little bit, man, I got to tell you, you are one of the most dedicated servant leaders, dads, and husbands I may have ever seen. So I just want to honor you for doing that. It's certainly one thing to show up and speak and talk, but like, walking the walk and showing up and doing that all, not just in the sense of, being a leader in the business world, but like in terms of actually showing up as a husband and a dad, man, it's rare. And it's one of the reasons why I do this show and have those conversations so we can have more of those. So just want to start by honoring you for doing that and welcoming out of your life. Thank you.
Man, I truly appreciate that. I thank you for that. That means a lot, man, because as dads, as everything, all the hats we have to wear, we kind of, we're so focused on just getting the thing done that we often forget that, to celebrate ourselves. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. Is that a mentality that you've always had, or was that like a very intentional thing that you put in place as you became a husband, as you became a dad? Like, talk me through that process.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of both, I would say. I've always said that when those times come, as far as being a husband and being a dad, when it happened, I wanted to be the best I could be. I had no blueprints. I didn't have my dad in my life myself. And I think those types of things kind of drive you to be a little bit better, to kind of not take any moments for granted, to put the best foot forward, whatever that means for that day and that moment, in everything that you do, and do it genuinely and do it authentically. So that's why that means so much to me. That's what you just said to start off that conversation.
Man, I love that. Is it, talking about servant leadership, what do you think one of the most important ways to be a good servant leader is? Like, what is a good character trait that someone who is going to be a good servant leader has to work on in themselves first?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for one, self-awareness. You have to have self-awareness. That's where everything begins. I talk a lot about emotional intelligence, and the first pillar of that is becoming aware of you. What's going on internally? What is the language that you're using when you speak to yourself, and how is that then self-managed so it's conveyed in a different way when you go and interact with someone else? Because only then can you lead with empathy. Can you really be a servant and not be, self-serving? There's a fine line between, a lot of people say I'm a servant leader, but they're only servant leaders to get their agenda done. And that's on the board of manipulation. So we really have to be conscious of that and make sure that we're actually leading, not just to get an outcome for ourselves, but to help people become better.
Man, I love that you said that, because it's a thing that I've seen so much in people who claim they are a servant leader, like you said, but it's really very self-centered. They're doing this leadership thing just to get their own needs met first, and then ultimately they don't really care about what happens to the people on their team and the people around them. Mm-hmm. So long as they've gotten their goals met, the rest of them can kind of go off.
Right.
It's difficult though, especially for someone kind of starting out, to put their own needs aside and worrying about the needs of the team as a whole. I think is a difficult mindset to get into. What would your thoughts be on that for someone who's looking to be a better servant leader? How do you put the needs of your team ahead of your own? Like, what does the team look like?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Jim. And I always say that it's really counterintuitive to be a servant leader, because the human nature is to protect ourselves. A lot of the things we do, like, fear is to protect us, to keep us safe. The way we react naturally is to kind of protect us, keep us safe. So it's really counterintuitive to say, how can I make sure that they're okay? How can I get them to be better? But it starts with taking ownership of that, saying, you know what, I am the leader of them, and it's not that I'm leading you. I'm actually serving you, right? I'm here to make sure that you have everything you need, because you have to put the people first to get the best results. If you can ensure that you're providing them with the support, the resources, and keep them at the level, at the best version of themselves, you get the better results. And I think that that's the mindset you have to have. It's like, you know what? They're the ones that allow me to be successful, right? They're driving that success. And we sometimes forget that. We sometimes are like you think that you can do it on your own. And that's the first thing we need to wipe out of our minds as leaders. We don't have all the answers. We can't do everything on our own. In order to really succeed, you have to be willing to delegate and relinquish that power that comes with that leadership. So that's really what it takes first. And then if someone's just starting out, again, start small. Identify what success is for you, not for everyone else, what it is for you. If you say, I want to be a servant leader, what does that mean in this case? Does it mean that you want to get a certain number of people promoted? Does it mean that you want to delegate people? Does give them certain job aspects? Does it mean that you're going to pour into their training? What is servant leadership to you? So you have to define that clearly so that you have a metric to follow. And then once you can do that, then you can break it out to smaller milestones. Okay, am I really being a servant leader? Am I taking time to do one-on-ones with my people? Am I going the extra mile to ensure that they have the resources and support they need? Am I taking ownership when they fall short? Am I saying, what can I do a little bit better, and having that conversation with them? Am I open to feedback? Right? Am I personalizing it and internalizing it, or am I listening to what they're looking to tell me? So those are some of the things that you would start with.
I love that. And I think the question of why do you want to be a servant leader in the first place is a great question to ask. To be honest with you, I don't know that I've ever actually thought about it myself.
Yeah.
And when you said that, the answer that I came up with was a genuine care for the people around me, to see them live their best life and not struggle with things that I've struggled with in the past.
Mm.
So I'm kind of curious on, maybe for you, what are the motivations that drive you to be a servant leader?
Yeah, some of the ones that drive me are really one, because I see what happens on the other side of that. Being, serving in the military, having time in the private sector. I saw what that leads to, and it's not just the bottom line being impacted. It's actually lives being impacted. So I've lost a ton of friends to suicide. I see opioid addictions, substance abuse on the rise. So I really want to nip that. I want people to, like you said, live the best version of themselves, for themselves, but also because that's legacy. That's like, that passes down for generations. So I want people to understand that being a servant leader really impacts outside of the workplace, outside of the space, outside of that conversation that you had. That is a trickle down effect, and it creates a domino effect. So if you are a servant leader, you're pouring into that person, they're going to pour into another person, they're going to have better relationships, and it just makes the world a better place. So that's first. The second thing that really drives me to be a servant leader is I just genuinely, I want to leave this place better than I found it. And when I say that, again, I think it all starts with people. I think it all starts with one conversation at a time, one action at a time. And that's what drives me. Even if I'm not at my best that day, what's the one thing I can do to really move closer to that goal of making this thing better than it was when I came in here? And that's how I take every day.
Yeah, I love that. And again, I just want to honor you a little bit here, because even looking through your social media, man, it's clear to me that it's not about you. It's about what can you inspire in other people and show them an example of what's possible. And I think that's a great quality of a really good servant leader, is not shining the light on yourself for your own credit and glory, but maybe to tell a story so people can see themselves in you and see some potential in things that you've gone through, and see you as an example of, man, he did it, so I can too. So again, honor to you for doing that. it's amazing to see, and I love being surrounded by people having conversations with other people who are lit up like that, because like you said, for us to show up and have these conversations allows other people the opportunity to not go through some of the things that maybe you or I have gone through, to live a better life. And man, it's amazing to see the difference that happens when people show up. And it's not always simple. It's not always direct, right? Because there's a lot of times when you will put in days, weeks, months of work and effort into something, but not see tangible fruit.
For sure.
And all of a sudden you'll get a message from someone that says, hey, you posted something on social 3 months back, and I want to just thank you because it changed my life. Right? Have you had experiences like that where you might not see the fruit of it right away?
For sure, Jim. When you are on this journey, I think more often than not, that's how it goes. So, and I appreciate you. I appreciate you honoring me on that, and I honor you for creating this space, this platform for the reason why you created it, right? Realizing you missed, those important days and saying, what's more important for me? And I think that's a question we have to ask constantly. So when you see oh man, I'm putting all this work in and all this other things, again, you got to ask why you started it in the first place and what is the most important aspect of that. It's not really the views and the likes and all that other stuff, but if you get that one person that says, "Man, I'm so glad you posted that. I'm so glad you show up authentically. I'm so glad you step into your vulnerability and see it as a strength. I'm so glad that you show up here every day. I may not like all of your posts, but I see you." Those are the messages that really they confirm that what you're doing in the path that you're walking is going to be an arduous journey. We know that. You're going to have more days where you see nothing happens than you will have when you get those messages. But the key here is this. It's always going to come when you need it most. That message always pops in my inbox when I'm like, man, I'm tired. I don't know. I don't know if this is the right thing I should do, because you have that. Every human that's looking to make an impact, not from just becoming a guru or saying sound bites, but actually from a genuine space, is going to have that part of the journey. But you just have to just take one step at a time and realize that you're walking something that is not easy, right? But it is so worth it.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up too, because it's a thing that I think a lot of people don't realize, is that for people like you or I who spend so much time pouring into other people without really seeing a lot of tangible fruit from it right away, it can be, I don't know the right word I'm looking for here. It's not depressing necessarily, but it can definitely set you back a bit when you get those days where you feel like, man, I'm just not making any progress. Is it worth it? Because it's definitely, there's a lot of days, and they can pile up, where it becomes thankless, where you think hey, I'm having these conversations, I'm putting this content out, I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm not seeing fruit from it. Maybe I should be selfish and do something for me instead. Or, man, I'm doing all this stuff because it's the right thing to do, but I'm not seeing tangible results from it right away. Maybe I should stop. And I think for people in that position, it can be really difficult to deal with their own mess sometimes when they're pouring out so much love into other people. And it can feel isolated, it can feel lonely. What are some things that maybe you've noticed in that same realm, or ways that you might combat that?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I recommend is to find, even if you think it's a small win, celebrate those small victories. And because that keeps you on track, that allows you to be in a space of oh, I'm doing something, I'm moving forward. It's progress, not perfection, right? And when I say the definition of perfection is actually being the best version of yourself that you can in that moment. And that's all we can ask ourselves. The other part is introspection. So not just reflecting and saying, okay, how did that go? But asking, what have I learned from those days when it felt thankless, when I felt like I was down in the dumps? What am I learning? Is there a pattern here? Is there something that I can do differently to make sure I'm showing up as the best version of myself, to pour into myself? Those are necessary. They're very necessary because we can't always look for that extrinsic motivation or that thank you to pop in our inbox. So it has to be a deeper seated reason why we continue to do it. And we have to really continue to rediscover it because it changes. Your why changes, right? So when I had my, when I got married and had my daughter, that became a part of my why. Before that, the why was more of me looking at people and what I said earlier, like just trying to make that impact for others. But then as they became, I now have a physical embodiment of what I feel inside. It's like, okay, this is worth it. This is worth it. I can wake up and look to my right and see them too, and they pour into me without them even knowing it. So we have to have things like that just become drivers for you, not motivators, but drivers to say, like, even in that worst day, I'm never going to quit on a bad day. And I think that that's what really has to be your mindset when you're doing this stuff. And then the other piece to this, outside of the the celebration and being, introspective about things, is the third thing is we do have to find ways for self-care. And self-care, I feel like, should be something free. Like me, I like to go outside and just spend some time in nature without technology, to just disconnect and just be with myself. And that be could be anything. I could be just letting things out. Like if I feel like I'm holding something in, I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to do something where I'm not just holding back and putting a facade on for myself, because we have to let our emotions go and we have to process those emotions, whatever it is. Like you said, when you feel like this is not going well, you're going to be frustrated. You're going to be upset. You might be hurt if you put something out there you thought was going to do well and it doesn't. So we have to acknowledge these things, but then we have to learn from it and move forward.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say there is it's really about disconnecting the result from the work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you really enjoy the work and you pour your love into the work, regardless of the result, like if you get celebrated or not, because the work aligned with your core values, who you are, your authentic self, and your personal why, it's a win. Doesn't matter if it's celebrated or not. It's part of who you are, and it's an outward expression of that. Is that
Absolutely,
my other
absolutely, man. And you said that beautifully. Yeah, it's we're so focused on the outcome a lot, and we don't control the outcomes. I mean, anyone listening, I'm sorry to bust your bubble, but you don't control the outcome, right? But you control the how you perceive the journey. You control that. You control your effort, and then you control what you're going to do when things don't go well for you. So that's the three things that we have to look at.
Yeah, I love that. Talk to me a little bit about earning a bronze star, because I know that's a part of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
That's a part of your history, and thank you for your service.
Appreciate you, brother.
It's one thing to say, "Hey, I'm a leader because I've led a business or I lead a family," but there's a different level of leadership I feel like that it takes to earn that bronze star. It's a tangible representation of physically going out there and doing what it takes. Tell me a little bit more about that story.
Yeah, I always say that's the award I wish I never received, because of why I received that. So I received my Bronze Star because there was a bombing on the base where I was stationed in Afghanistan on Boardroom Air Base, on Veterans Day of 2016. And what I had to do was, train as you fight, they say. So I just kicked into action, got people to get medical triage, to get medical assistance at the hospital, and then was part of the remains cleanup team, which meant that I was taking care of, what was left after the aftermath. So, and that's really the part that was the hardest part of it all, was treating that suicide bomber the same way I treated my colleagues, the people I actually cared about. So that award really is why that experience is something that really has shaped the way I see everything. Right. So when you talk about the leadership and everything else, like I realized, like, protecting dollars and ones and zeros in tech and all these other things, they really don't mean as much to me as they mean to other leaders. Right. Yes, they are necessary. It's necessary to make money to have a business. But that's really another reason why I just care so much about people. And letting them know that they are powerful and they're beautiful and they have strength, no matter how they feel internally. We just have to discover it. And that's so I appreciate you even asking about that.
Yeah. I think it highlights also the fragility of everything,
Yeah,
like of people and relationships and the value of time that
absolutely.
we get here, and not to take it for granted, because how quickly it could all change.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. It's like one day you're lining up to run a 5K to celebrate Veterans Day. Next thing, there's pandemonium. Right? People are injured. There's screaming, writhing in pain. There's a detonation. You don't even know what's happening until like your cognitive mind can catch up and process. Because everything before that is all emotion, all training. And that's how a lot of life is. It's like and that's one of the things I feel like a lot of people struggle with these days. And it's like when you talk about resilience and overcoming adversity, it really takes you understanding that that's a moment in time. And that's the problem with PTSD. It really takes you understanding like this is a moment in time and it's going to pass because sometimes it feels like an eternity. A day turns into months, months turns into years. So we really have to be able to, kind of almost remove yourself, right? Remove yourself from whatever situation is going on and kind of get that external that perspective so you can say, what can I do now? I don't know what happened. I can't control everything that's going on, but just taking a step back to slow down to say, what can I do right now? Right. And that's one of the things that I learned, in my time in the military, but especially in that moment, because, everyone else is speeding up. And that's what's happening in this world today. Like everyone's making these decisions. There's divisiveness because everyone wants to lead with their own agendas, that they're not slowing down enough to see how their decisions and their actions have consequences for other people. So that's I always when I make a decision, I always think about what the consequences may be.
Yeah. I'd like to ask. I don't want to make you the authority on this topic, so pardon the question. But
No
one of
worries.
the things I'm curious about is when our veterans come back, right? I understand, and I'm not a veteran myself, so I don't have a lot of experience in this field. But um, I don't think as a country we do a great job of supporting them the best way possible.
Mhm.
One of the things that I see, and again, I'm no expert here, but just an observation. I would have to imagine as a man, when you're out there, you're serving, you have a sense of purpose, right? You're on a mission, you have a task ahead of you, you know exactly what you're going to do.
Right.
When you come back, there's got to be a feeling of loss for the purpose, the mission, the task ahead when you're just thrown back into society and you say, hey, good luck, right? Not knowing your authentic self, what your purpose is, what your mission is in life, in the civilian world. Is that a real thing where people struggle with, hey, I no longer have that mission set out in front of me. I don't know who my authentic self is to find that purpose, to find that path that I really should be on. And is there a way that we can better support that?
Yeah, that's definitely a real thing. A lot of in veterans, that definitely happens in the veteran community, but we also see it in the civilian side. People retire and then shortly after, they pass because they've lost their purpose, that sense of identity. So I would say like to generalize it a bit, it's like to support that whoever that person is transitioning, one, we have to have a support system. You have to have people that you can talk to. From a veteran perspective, oftentimes we don't feel like we can talk to civilians because it's just different. Right? It's a different culture, different mentality, different experience. And that's where a lot of vets struggle. So maybe they need to get with a community of other vets through the VA, or, there's a lot of nonprofit organizations that in various communities that they can look at. So it starts with us, one, and we have to be willing to get that help and find that support. The second piece to that transition and finding purpose is I like to recommend an exercise called finding the Ikigai, right? And it's just finding your reason for being. So they ask 4 questions that are really pointed towards you doing the introspection once again, so you can discover what that purpose is. Like, what about that service that you were in, that you were doing in the military, can be transitioned into the civilian side? What roles are there available? What tasks can you be doing? And I think that that's an exercise that is missing a lot, where you say, okay, this is what I enjoyed about this, or this is what I was used to, this is what I thought was my purpose. How can I still have that? How can I still serve in a different way? And I think that that's a very important question that is often missed. Now there are, they're doing a better job at helping with transitioning, but the thing about it is it's happening while you're trying to get back home. You're trying to get to your family, or you're trying to close that chapter in your life. So I also feel like that's an opportunity where they really need to kind of get different checkpoints. So, okay, I'm transitioning 6 months out. They usually walk you through so you can find like a career and all this other stuff. Ask you if you have any medical issues, all of that stuff. But most people are just like, no, 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 no. So there needs to be another check after that to say, all right, how are you doing now that now that you're out, or do you need any more assistance? Instead of the vet having to go, they should be proactive and ask that. I feel. I think that those components will make it a lot easier to help people rediscover that purpose, and live a more fulfilling life.
Yeah. What about the tendency men have to put pride and ego first and not be willing to ask for help?
Yeah, yeah, that's one of the things that I really want to change. Actually, when I first started my company, that was the focus, to help men become more vulnerable. It didn't go well as I wanted it to, right? But I'm still on that journey, because it's getting worse. It's getting worse, actually, and that's why men die earlier than women, right? Historically, that's why we have a lot of health issues, because we're holding all of these things in. So it really starts with the conversation being had. A lot of us were told to be men. We couldn't share certain emotions. We couldn't cry. We couldn't do specific things. So it starts with that us. And we have to kind of change that and say, yes, you can cry. Yes, you can share your emotions. You just have to share them intelligently, right? Yes, you can, tap into your feminine energy, because that's really going to allow you to be a better person. You shouldn't be all uptight all the time, or have this machismo and think that that means that you're a man. That's that that's not being a man, right? So we have to change the definition of what manhood is, and that's the only way that we're going to start having that paradigm shift, as this next generation comes up.
Yeah, I love that. It makes me think about this definition that a good friend of mine has for what is a warrior. And a lot of people, when they hear the term warrior, they think about someone who's going to go out and wage war, someone who's going to go out and do whatever it takes to accomplish the mission. And I think about the violent side first.
Yes.
But what a warrior really is someone who brings peace. What they do is they go out and they do whatever it takes to achieve peace. And it doesn't necessarily always mean violence, right? The end result or the end goal of a warrior is to bring peace back to their village, back to their home, back to their family.
Right. I love that.
Now, they could do that in a lot of different ways. They could do that by creating a house that's full of purpose and joy. They can do that by having to go out and face the world and do the difficult things and then come back and help protect their family. But a lot of people, I think, attach their identity to a willingness to do violence rather than a willingness to bring back peace.
Hey, so true. So, and that I love that, Jim, and I think you're spot on. But again, it's like you said, most people go to that violence, and we're just conditioned for that. So we have to change the conditions, and that's our job. Our job is this, where we are, you and I and everyone else. Our job is to change the conditions that are the next generations grow up in, and speak different languages. Let them know that there are other options out there. Let them know that, we used to say, like, the pen is mightier than the sword, and all these other things, but we don't show it. We don't embody it. So we have to start letting them know like your words are usually more powerful, right? And they create a better impact and a better outcome for than having, casualties about. You should try to create common wins, right? We talk about win-win situations, but we're so conditioned that we have to destroy someone or something else to be on top, and that's just not the case.
Yeah. Yeah, like there should be a bit of an escalation process
Mhm.
to get to that point, right? Because I think you should be capable of violence,
Yes.
right? And whatever way you want to phrase that, but not have it be your first tactic, your first approach,
Yeah,
right? We should look
escalation of
at, hey,
force.
how can what? What's that?
Escalation of force, right?
Yeah,
That's the key.
yeah. I mean, I would assume that you're actually properly taught that, right?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
that's a
Absolutely.
legitimate thing you're taught.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look back at wars, right? I mean, even Iraq, when we being the military, U.S. military, when we first went in there was no escalation of force rules. Like if someone walked around with a gun, right, we could shoot them. We can take them out because we've seen them as a threat. But later on, we were doing more harm than good because our whole campaign is about winning hearts and minds. And like you said, the warrior is not always taking violent action. So what they did was they changed the doctrine to say there's what you call hard and soft target. So the soft target is they're walking around in the Middle East. People walk around with guns all the time. That's just that's just how they do. So we had to realize that culturally, and we had to say the only way that we can engage, first we're going to talk to you, we're going to say whatever we say, like, hey, put your weapon down if you're pointing at us, all those sort of things. But we had to let them engage first to know that they were actually trying to harm us, right? So then we could take action and take them out as a target. So we can do the same thing in the civilian side where we say, hey, let's have a conversation, not an argument, because then again you're escalating to the point where no one's getting anything done, accomplished. So having the conversation, having dialogue should always be our first thing. And you have to be open. That's the hardest part. That's why people are really poor at communicating, because they're not open. They're closed. They have their ideas, they have their perspective, and they feel like theirs is right. So we have to open our minds to listen to what the other perspective is and say, all right, find the jewels. I like to say, what are they looking to tell me? What questions can I ask to get clarification? Or how is what they're saying different? Because a lot of times we say the same thing and we just so upset and frustrated that we don't hear it. So those are some of the keys that we need to start implementing before we get to that violence.
Yeah, and I would think, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I would think in that scenario where you walk around, you see some dude with a gun, you have to be so comfortable with your own capability and your own response and your own training that you know exactly what to do if push comes to shove and you have to engage,
Mm-hmm.
that you're not necessarily worried about it. You're willing to have the conversation first because you're comfortable with your training, who you are. If it escalates to that point, you know you're in a good spot. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
So
go ahead.
here's my follow up to that.
Yeah.
If you apply that same thought process to walking around being loaded with a question or an attitude, if you're so comfortable with who you are that you're not necessarily outwardly attacking other people, but you're willing to have conversations or listen to other people, listen to opposing points of view because you know who you are, right? I think that same theory applies here with not having to be an outward jerk and go scream and yell at people or go pick fights because someone has a different opinion than you, because you're comfortable knowing who you are, what your opinion is, that if you actually need to defend yourself, you have facts to stand on. Right? I think that really carries over pretty well. Is that, you feel the same way?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I love that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love how you worded that for sure. Like, when you think about insecurities, lack of confidence, and all that stuff, that's what really shows up to me. Like, you may not call it that, like that person who's that jerk, and really, I feel like they're compensating for something else that's going on. Right, one, either
Yeah.
that or they haven't learned. Right, they haven't learned that emotional intelligence component, and I just want people to know, like, that's a skill you can learn, but first you have to be willing to heal. Like whatever is going on, I know I had to heal. I had to kind of face the traumas that were causing me to react in that way, and that anger that was inside of me to become the person that you're talking to today. And it's not something that I'm perfect at. It's a practice. Right? There are some
Right.
times where I lose it. I'm like, man, what the, but that I have to realize that and say, okay, I want to do better next time because it's a practice. I am human and I make mistakes. And I feel like we have to become more okay, right, with making those mistakes and being willing to ask the questions and ask for forgiveness and have those conversations and admit that you don't know something, or you have an insecurity about something, so that you can learn from it, or else we're going to keep doing what we're doing right now.
Yeah. And it's impossible to grow if you pretend you know everything already, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%,
I
man. You
mean,
can't. You can't.
if you look at real life scenarios, you've got a daughter, right? Very young.
Mhm. Yep. One
Okay.
little daughter.
So as she grows and ages and now is going to start school and start having friends and all the different scenarios that are going to come with first dance and prom and man escalate all the way up to boyfriends and wedding, right? There's a lot of life that's going to happen. I don't want to throw that on you already, sorry, but like for real, you start thinking about these scenarios you're going to have to face as a dad, as a man. We're not really ready for that. We haven't gone through that before,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
so much as you've got a good grasp on, hey, where are you at right now as a leader, as a husband, as a father, you're going to come up with new scenarios that are going to challenge that and force you to grow. So, when you say you've done the work to heal and then you say you continue to do the work, I think that's just a really great point. I wanted to highlight that. There's going to be these new scenarios that come up that are increasingly more challenging as the years go on. So,
Absolutely.
like, to tie that back to what we talked about before with really loving the process and separating it from the results, right? Because this is not something that you can just accomplish and be done. You can't just say, okay, I had a kid, I am a good dad now. Like, you're
Right.
never done with that. It's
Right.
a continuous process where you become an even better dad as the days go on.
100%. And I feel like I'm so glad you said that, Jim, because like they're what you call process goals, right? They never end. They're just like something that guides you. It becomes a part of your core values. It becomes a part of what you look to accomplish every day, and those are good, right? That there's not a defined point where it ends, like being a fantastic dad or being a leader, because it allows us to learn. And I feel like that should be the goal every day. You should look to learn from your experiences every day. And I also want to make a point, like we're so focused on doing well, a lot of times, that we miss the lessons in the shortcomings. So I'm so happy you said that.
Yeah. One of the best experiences of my life is showing up and learning from my kids. And it's in all sorts of random experiences. It doesn't have to be like this big fancy thing. It could be as simple as like when we sit down to go play toys together, their perspective on things, because it is not burdened with 40 years of living in the real world, but just the way that they see things naturally. And you can just genuinely shut up and listen to your kid, no matter how old they are.
Mhm.
The concept of being able to be 40 years old and learn from a 3-year-old feels crazy. You think, hey, I'm 10 times older than you, I should know way more. Or I've gone through this process, I've got degrees, I've got all this training, I've got mentors, whatever, I should know more than you. But just this to shut up and listen to the knowledge of a kid, I think is one of the best gifts that you can ever possibly receive. Do you
I
have that same experience?
wholeheartedly agree. As I said, my daughter is one, and she's taught me more lessons in her little life than I've learned in a while. I feel, about patience, about resilience, about curiosity. Children, like you said, they haven't been burdened by all that life brings, so they have this curiosity that and this perspective that is unbiased. Really, they're just like going through
Right.
things. They don't realize, all the pain that and all that other stuff that happens in life. So I feel like that's why we need to look back at them. to say, what can we learn? Play. I mean, you think about play, like that's becoming a thing in corporate world, like the power of play, because we look back at children and realize how it boosts them up, how much they learn from just playing and all these other things. So, people are trying to adapt that, but I feel like, it's something that you won't get unless you're actively like observing and engaged in that moment.
Yeah. Something that I just realized too is, we talked a lot about disconnecting from the results.
Hey.
There is no result of play except fun.
Right.
Right? You're just enjoying the process of playing.
Yes.
It's not like you're playing to achieve a certain goal. You're just genuinely having fun doing the thing you're doing.
Yeah.
And yet somehow as adults, we stop doing that. And then all of a sudden we're like, man, why am I not progressing, or why am I not having fun? Why don't I have joy? Because I've attached everything to a specific result. I've stopped allowing myself to play.
Yeah, like there always has to be an.
Now we are learning stuff from kids. Love it.
Absolutely.
They're not even here right now. We're still learning.
Awesome, man. Yeah, and I see your Groot, your little Groot, baby Groot in the background.
Yep.
But no, that is so key. And I feel like, that's something that I challenge myself to do. It's like you got to really be in the moment to get what we're talking about here. And oftentimes that's why I say we need to stop focusing so much on the outcome of the result, because that doesn't allow you to be in the moment. When you think about that, you're like, I need this thing to happen. So you're like doing this thing like, I hope this goes right. I hope this goes right. Why can't we just say, you know what? I'm going to do my best. I'm going to have fun with it. I'm going to learn something. And if I do all those things, then I'm good. And if that thing happens that I had the goal of, excellent. But oftentimes it looks so much differently than what we wanted. Right. So you have to be open to that. Like this business thing, man, I mentioned I started focusing on men, helping them to, realize vulnerability is strength and overcome their obstacles that's within. That didn't go well. So I had to pivot. But I wasn't so tied to it that I was like, oh, I got to stop this business. It's not working, right? This isn't going well for me. Let me stop. No, I just looked at the lessons and said, all right, this middle-aged white woman wants to work with me. What is she wanting to work for? She still had the same thing. So I can still apply that and say, okay, how can I help her overcome her obstacles? And then that sense has morphed. So we have to be willing to do that and learn the lessons and just say, doesn't have to look the way I envisioned it, because a lot of times it ends up looking even better if we just allow ourselves to enjoy the process.
Yeah, I think that's sort of like flexible, firm on the goal, flexible on the approach, right? So you know what you want, but it might look different than you expected it to, but you're still going to go out and pursue the actual end goal. It might just take a different approach.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah, man, I love that. If you had one perspective or mindset piece of advice to give someone to have a slightly better day today, what might that be?
Man, to have a slightly better day today, I would say implement a gratitude practice. Like that helps me win the day, so to speak. Because oftentimes I wake up, I'm like, damn, my body hurts. Mentally, I got a day packed with meetings. I don't know if I can do it. But when I start doing that gratitude and being thankful, yes, to a higher power, but for me, like I am thankful for you to not have stopped when this thing happened. I'm thankful for you for believing in yourself enough to go for entrepreneurship, whatever it is for you. Look to think of 3 things that you're grateful to yourself for, and plant that. Start in the mindset of gratitude. That'll help everything that comes after that. It'll help you process and digest it a little bit better.
Yeah, I love that. It's such an amazingly simple practice, but so powerful. I find myself doing it literally every day. Yesterday, one of the things that I started implementing was thinking about something that you were upset about and then purposely finding the reason to be grateful for that opportunity. So feeling stressed about whatever the scenario is, looking for the gratitude in it. I think when you can find reasons to be grateful, it, again, like we talked about before with removing the result from the process, it allows you to really go through it and just enjoy the process and find things to want to have fun doing. We talk about play, we talk about all this stuff. I think gratitude's such an important part. So I'm so happy you brought that up.
Yeah, man. So yesterday, I'll give like a most recent example. Yesterday, like I have a lot of physical ailments, and I've been hitting the gym regularly, and I was like, oh man, I'm making progress. I'm not always in pain like I was, but yesterday was horrible. So I couldn't even do like lunges and squats because my body just wouldn't allow me, and I broke down, man. I'm talking about like it just hit me so much. I was so frustrated from that moment that I just cried. But when I cried, what it did was my wife was there with me, so she knows this journey. When I cried, what it did was I had to take a moment and just realize, like, man, you know what? Like, you wouldn't even be here. Like a few months ago, you weren't even in the gym. Like, you just had stopped, because the pain was so great. But you're here now and you're working through it. And my trainer, by him being so gracious and knowledgeable, he just shifted my workout so I could focus on something else and finish. But that moment of gratitude changed my whole perspective. Like, man, you can't do this thing right now. But I had to stop and pause. Like, man, just a few months ago, you couldn't even be in here because you were in so much pain. So, like, doing things like that, it changes the perspective of the adversity that you're facing.
Yeah, I think that's so important because we don't often look back on where we were 6 months ago, a year ago, 6 years ago. Like, a lot of times people forget that right now you're living a life that at one point in the past you prayed for.
Yeah.
Like, there are things in your day today that 5 years ago, 5 months ago, you prayed for. And right now you're living in them, but you're not experiencing the gratitude for, hey, I prayed for this day. You're just looking at, oh, there's this other problem. I'm going to have to pray for that for 6 months from now. But I'm not grateful for this thing that I really wished for 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So I love that you say that. I think it's great to look back.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, man, this has been an absolute pleasure of a conversation, and I look forward to having more of them. Where can people support you, carry on this conversation? How do people follow you from here?
Absolutely. I agree. This has been a phenomenal conversation, Jim. I appreciate you having me on No Half Cakes, and
My pleasure.
appreciate you just sharing your platform with me, man. So to find me, you can go to LinkedIn, just search my name, Jevon Wooden. You'll see a light bulb. Go ahead and connect with me. I know it says follow first, but connect with me. And then shoot me a message. Let me know you heard me on No Half Cakes. I would love to have a conversation with you. And then the other place you can find me is jevonwooden.com. You can also send me a message through there.
All right, man. I love it. And again, I appreciate you. I appreciate the example that you set and continue to set. And it's a worthy message. So if no one has told you this today yet, and I can be the first, thank you, and keep doing it because it really makes a difference. So thank you. Grateful for you.
Appreciate
And,
you.
go enjoy your day.
Yeah, same thing. Same to you, man. Enjoy your day.
Thank you.